All right, guys. So in this episode, we have a good one. We have John, formerly very high level, worked in the military, built and sold multiple businesses. John, just to I got a context to your background.
Sure. So I was not in the military. I was actually in the civilian national security sector, but did a ton of work with the military. And so it's easiest to maybe think about it like that. But in fact, I was a civilian. So I worked in the broader national security world. So I lived and worked primarily in North Africa and the Middle East, did a lot of different stuff, but primarily focused on stopping the spread of weapons of mass destruction and some counterterrorism stuff. They taught me Arabic, and I spent the majority of my late 20s and early 30s over in that part of the world. And then I moved back to the States, started building and buying businesses. And over the course of that, got really good at kind of building a modern global workforce and launched Sagan, and have been ripping in that business ever since.
Nice. And what made you get into this business specifically? Because for myself, I've had a lot of issues with recruiting and finding people, whether it was different websites, which I won't name. What made you get into it, and how have you solved that issue with like
Yeah.
finding the right person?
So living and working abroad, anybody who spent any time outside the country knows that there are brilliant people who don't happen to be in the US. But for a whole variety of factors that we could talk about, people only really understood a global workforce as like Philippines or India, people who are really cheap and are kind of like low level. And that wasn't my experience at all with the global workforce. And so I wanted to kind of build a company that let people hire directly and didn't have this kind of like markup kind of temp agency kind of vibes to it where they only get like 20 cents on the dollar. And, it lets you just recruit way better people. They're happier, you're happier. I mean, we just hired an M&A analyst who worked at JP Morgan for 5 years in Buenos Aires, working for a lower middle market PE fund. And he's happy, the firm's happy, and that it's not kind of like a call center in the Philippines kind of vibe.
Right. No, yeah, for myself, I think the number one issue was always that language barrier where it's like you're going to send them a message or some sort of objective and it kind of gets lost in translation. So for yourself, like how do you find the right specific people? Is it just like tailored to specific countries like Argentina, or how did you kind of go about
Yeah.
it?
So I think of different. So I'm assuming you hired Philippines or India, like VA style, right? Yeah. I mean, that's usually how most people, people read 4 Hour Work Week in 2007 and haven't kind of like moved past that. I actually work with one of the guys who's mentioned in that book, running an old one of the agencies. His name's Zaki. He's incredible. He's a really smart dude. What I would say is different countries are like different musical instruments. And so that's the analogy that I most oftentimes quote, which is depending on what kind of music you're trying to play, I would hire from different countries. And so, and this is all I'm painting in very broad brushes, but Philippines is wonderful for certain types of roles and horrible for others. Argentina is more expensive, but maybe is way better at certain roles, or South Africa or Ireland, right? I mean, Ireland is a great place to hire that is a global workforce that's less expensive than the US, but I would only hire them for certain types of roles like sales, for example. So it's really based on exactly what the need is. And then you say, okay, based on this need, what musical instrument do I want to play? You don't play smooth jazz with a tuba,
Right.
right? That's what I'd say.
Okay, so based on the specific vertical, you more or less have a general sense of, okay, I could go to this country, I'll probably get very high quality individuals that could complete that task, right? That's my
I
understanding.
would say it's not based on the vertical. I'd say it's based on the job,
The job
right?
itself.
So, for example, I would almost never have somebody talking to customers from the Philippines live, not because people from the Philippines aren't brilliant, but because there is a association of a Filipino accent with kind of like low quality, because there's a lot of kind of like low quality call centers there. Doesn't
Right.
mean there aren't people who aren't freaking Nobel Prize winners from the Philippines,
For
but to
sure.
the American ear, it sounds low quality. Whereas a mild Hispanic accent, bro,
Right.
that's California.
Right.
Right. So there's no association. So that's just an example of understanding in a sales role. Probably wouldn't do somebody from the Philippines. Doesn't mean they're not exceptions, doesn't mean they're not brilliant, but I just wouldn't want to overcome that kind of like association with that way of speaking.
And also in that job hiring process, I was reading one of your posts on your newsletter of the plumber that, from my understanding, he hired one individual just to do one task, which was just calling cities to pull permits, from
Huh?
my understanding.
Yeah.
In your hiring process with your company, is it more so that these individuals are hyper focused on one specific task, or can they handle multiple different things at a given
Yeah.
time?
So what'd you study in school?
Accounting and finance.
Cool. So you studying econ?
A little bit, yep.
Okay. Do you remember specialization of labor from Adam Smith and the Wealth of Nations
It's
by any
been a
chance?
minute, but it is
Okay.
ringing some bells, yeah.
Okay, cool. So the only way that wealth gets created is with specialized labor. Think how many cars can one guy build, one a year? How many can an assembly line build? Thousands, because all I do is hang the doors and all I do is whatever, right? And so what Global Town allows you to do is have and afford specialists at way lower revenues, which increases productivity like crazy. So when you're a really small company or you have to hire an American who's super expensive, you have to have them wear like 8 different hats just to break even on them. "Hey, can you do my bookkeeping? Can you cold call old leads? Can you do our crew schedule? Can you also do some scheduling for me?" And that's the only way I can make a role. But when you have these smaller things like, "I'm gonna have somebody who just does my accounts receivable," they can do it better, faster, stronger, more focused. They can push the ball farther because they wake up in the morning, they do accounts receivable. But historically, only really big companies could have an accounts receivable team, but now smaller companies can do it because if you hire globally, it's not going to cost you living in Southern California $60,000 benefits per hire. It's going to cost 20% of that. So you can actually build a team of specialists, which lets your company grow way faster.
And there's kind of to add on to that, right? There's this thing I read, and I was reading the 4 Hour Work Week the past week just to prep for this. Something called Pareto's Law, where it's saying 20% of our inputs result in 80% of our
Correct.
outputs. What are
Correct.
some of those roles that you see that people can hire that makes a huge impact and are actually making money?
What industry?
Well, I guess in terms like, for example, hiring someone that could reach out to leads on X platform or, is it
Yeah.
sales? Is it IT? Kind of
I mean,
department.
there's millions. I mean, we've done 2,000 hires in the last like 20 or so months. So, I mean, we've done everything. I mean, there's some really easy ones. Again, it depends on the sector though, right? So, a very common one that almost everybody needs is somebody to rework people who contacted you but didn't buy right away. Almost every company I know has this big CRM and they're getting a newsletter every now and then or a crappy email. And so paying somebody from South Africa $1,700 a month to call them and be like, "Hey, Steve, just want to reach out. I know you contacted us a few months ago. It wasn't a good fit at the time. We've actually got some great New Year's offers going on right now. I'd love to find some time to walk you through them. How's tomorrow?" And that person just reworking your old list very quickly pays for themselves. That would be an example of something that essentially everybody needs.
As we kind of go through the kind of development of artificial intelligence, you wrote another letter of the title was "I've been breaking my team," and you've been kind of making them more so use AI again and again and again to figure out, I guess, what are the things that are going to be commoditized. How has that affected your business, or how does that affect the future of just hiring people? Because like 10 years ago, for example, I think everyone was more so if they want to outsource something, they would go on Upwork or something along those lines. But nowadays, it's more so like a combination of both. Like, where do you see this
Sure.
heading in the next 5, 10 years?
Yeah, so I have this pyramid when I like speak at conferences and stuff I talk about, and at the top is the owner, below that is expensive employees, below that is lower cost employees, and below that is technology. So AI, automation, whatever. And your job as a business owner is to try to push things downward, right? What I would say is if I was a virtual assistant who did data entry, those are the people who are going to get chewed up by AI and automation first. So these kind of like very low level, $3 an hour whatever. Like we don't outsource. We just hire smart people in other countries. So it's not outsourcing. These people work for companies directly, which is a whole different way to spin it. So if I was somebody who just moved things around in a spreadsheet, I would say you're in trouble. Who just uploaded product SKUs to a Shopify store. That person's in trouble. The person who's talking to customers, solving problems, building things, writing not AI slop, that person's stronger than ever. Right. And so I think it's really about if you view global talent only as outsourcing, only as VAs, I would hate to run a company right now that does low level stuff from the Philippines because you're going to get chewed up. But if you're just hiring smart people who live in other countries, I mean, we're, growing like a freaking weed. So
Yeah, so more so AI is the tool to help individuals maybe, I don't know, build up their skill set a little bit more and just be even more valuable to individuals, right? That's kind of like the general gist.
yeah, I would say it lets you elevate, right? So instead of spending time categorizing receipts, you get to do more consultation. But if you don't have the skill or the ability to do consultation, you're in trouble. But if you're good, you don't have to spend as much time categorizing receipts and you get to go do more consultation work with your CFO clients or whatever it is. So I would say that AI is going to chew up bad people first. or low skilled people. But anybody who's skilled is no issues at all.
And then in this age, what are some skills that people can be, I guess, honing into, tapping into right now?
For me,
Yeah.
primarily interpersonal stuff is the most secure. So if you can sell, if you could solve problems, if you can be a trusted advisor, that stuff's never going anywhere. Nobody's going to trust AI to do that kind of stuff. So that would be what I'd be focusing on. I'd also be focusing on thinking about how to bring AI to new industries, because I think the combination of AI with industry expertise is really where all the money's going to be made in the next 20 years. It's not going to be I mean, the core models will do fine, but if you become known as the guy who can help roofing companies transform their business with AI and automation, I think that's a wonderful business that is going to continue to grow.
To be like the one-stop shop for, let's say, plumbers, and they could integrate AI using some sort of software you have to get more clients, something along those lines.
Yeah, just understand in depth the problems that growing plumbing companies have and use this whole new toolkit called AI and automation to solve those problems. That is a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful place to be sitting, I believe, right now in the kind of rapidly expanding universe of AI and automation.
Yeah, and also I would have to agree to the last point you said about interpersonal skills. I feel like everything that's technology based is being, just being done significantly faster, quicker. Someone that knows Python, maybe it's slightly less valuable, maybe today. But the kind of concept of having some sort of podcast or media format, at the end of the day, humans still want to do business with each other. So hence why, like, I've done this whole podcast thing. I feel like it's something that could still last long and have value for other people, whether it's reaching different audiences, and things of that sort. So for the newsletter that you have currently, is this to, I guess, funnel people to articulate what you're doing with your current business?
Uh, what I would say is, it's just to talk about what I'm doing, show people what's capable. Oftentimes, a lot of people end up joining Sagan, our company, if they need kind of hiring help. So, yeah, it's just kind of a personal newsletter, but also I end up getting a lot of customers or vendors from it as well.
And then in the website, I was going through it. How would it exactly work? Let's say someone wanted to get started today and work with your business. I saw there was like a membership and things of that sort. If you could break that down.
Yeah. So, about 95% of our customers are on an annual membership. There tends to be three ways that people hire globally. Number one is this staffing markup where I find somebody for $4 and build them to you for $10. There's a whole bunch of reasons why I don't work. Upwork is an example of that. You just tend to get lower quality people, and that kind of middleman doesn't add much value. Athena is like that too, right? Athena pays their talent $800 a month and they bill you $3,000. So that's the first way. So we don't do that. The second way is a headhunting model. And the example that most people know of is Somewhere or Nick Huber's model, right? You pay a large one-time fee per hire. It's usually between $5,000 and $10,000 per hire. And that's a better model because you can hire them directly, but ultimately 5 to 10 grand's a ton of money or more. So what we did is we think of it like Costco, which is we have people pay a flat annual membership based on their hiring needs. Our most popular option is $1,000 a month. And within that, you get 6 hires at no additional cost, which ends up being a very, very low per hire rate. So what I get is I get you for a year. So I'm happy I have stable, predictable revenue. And in exchange for you committing to a year, I charge you 80% less on a per hire basis than some of these one-off options. So that's how people tend to work with this.
Okay, so it's just to understand it better, it's like a flat fee, and then I could pick 6 individuals to effectively help me in my business.
Say you basically put in an order form and you say, I need a podcast producer. We take that. I have about 80, 90 folks on my team. We take that request and we go custom source it. We interview tons and tons of people. We screen, we do all that stuff. We deliver to you 3 people that we recommend. We say any one of these 3 people could be a great podcast edit for you, Gabriel. You look at those people, you interview them, and you say, oh my God, I want to hire Beth. At that point, you hire Beth and she now works for you. She doesn't work for me. I have no relationship with her at that point. That's all.
Got it. And what makes someone elite? Like, how do you find the right person? I read this article that you wrote as well. You hired, I believe it was like a Navy SEAL for like a fencing company. And for myself, I thought that was super cool. What are some of the qualities that you look for in someone?
Yeah, generally speaking, the way we believe in hiring, except in a few technical categories, is we believe in attributes based hiring, not skill based hiring. Because you can teach skills to anybody. You can teach somebody to use Notion or Salesforce or whatever it is, but you can't teach somebody to have the right types of attributes, right? So at least in our company, the attributes that we generally speaking hire for that we've had a ton of success with are smart, hungry, and coachable. So smart so that they know what the hell's going on, hungry because they want to get better, and coachable so that when you correct them, they learn from it. So we hire as much as we can. People who are smart, hungry, coachable, and then we build them into who we need them to be. And we've been very, very successful with.
And just to kind of backtrack on this a little bit too, when you guys hire, the difference between other websites, maybe like Upwork and Fiverr, is more so their model is just find the cheapest, most affordable talent. Is that kind of the big
No,
difference here? No?
no. So Upwork, you hire Bob from South Africa, and in Upwork it says his rate is $22 an hour. Of that $22 an hour, Bob gets 12 of it forever, right? So Bob is not your employee. He is essentially like a freelancer working off a platform. We help people hire full-time people that become parts of their team. Very different. This person works for your team. You should go visit them in Ecuador. You should fly them up to Manhattan to come. Like they are a part of your team. They just happen to live in Ecuador. That's the way that we do it.
And then before this business, I saw that you built and sold, I think it was 3 other companies. What were those other companies that you built and sold?
Most recent one was a home improvement company in Southern California, which is where I learned a lot of the stuff that I do now. Hard business. It was good business, but hard doing home improvements for companies. We grew up pretty fast and then, sold it. So yeah, learned a lot of lessons. I've written about that extensively in my newsletter if anybody wants to learn more.
Yeah, and then for those businesses, like for the home improvement example, like how would you generate leads? I feel like that's something that's difficult for a lot of companies. How did you go about it?
That business, what I tell people is it was a marketing company that happened to do home improvement, which is the whole game was customer acquisition. So in that instance, we had, probably 5 or 6 marketing channels that we ran. So we ran bottom of funnel Google PPC. We ran Facebook ads. We ran Yelp ads because those work great in California for home improvement. We did direct mail. We had referral partners. We did events. I mean, there's just, you are just trying to go out and acquire customers for, try to acquire them for a couple $100 each with a, average. I mean, you kind of work the numbers. So yeah.
And then in today's age, do you feel like there's something that works for you that's, like Facebook ads or X platform? Like what's your bread and butter
In
right
what
now?
bit, in what
One, the current one with
Yeah,
recruiting.
we have some pretty fancy go-to-market stuff, but most reliably has been content. Just writing smart stuff and letting smart people find us, podcasts like this or my Twitter account or my newsletter. Smart, aggressive people tend to find us because we're out there writing good stuff and creating good content.
And then current day, how do you go about like how does your day look like in terms of operating the business right now?
I have a pretty large management team who kind of operates most of the business. So I tend to be doing much more kind of strategic stuff or, maybe some M&A or, kind of big projects. I'm not really into the kind of day-to-day delivery of the business. I got a couple layers of organization between me and the kind of, day-to-day work that's getting done. So I get briefs and stuff like that, but I'm obviously kind of keeping my eye on things, but I'm not really delivering any of the work at this.
And for Sagan Passport, I know that you guys operate in different verticals. What is the ideal client, like in terms of maybe how much revenue they're generating, things of that sort?
Generally, we folks over $1 million a year, much lower than that. They should probably kind of piece some stuff together or DIY. And then above that, I mean, we have a $4 or $5 billion private equity company who does a ton of hiring with us. So we're pretty diverse within that. The biggest thing is folks who are growing and who are kind of like looking to make their business better. So if you're not interested, you're like, everything's great and I love every member of my team and, I kind of know what I'm doing. Not usually a good fit, but people who are saying, I'm looking for an edge. I'm looking to beat my competitors. I'm looking to kind of get to the next level professionally. Those tend to be the people that we do best with in supporting that growth.
And John, like from your experience, you've built and sold a lot of businesses already. Like, how did you know when to go about of outsourcing something or just grinding your face away and just doing it yourself?
What I would say is I believe the definition of a business, the way that I choose to define it, is that gets created separate from the efforts of the owner. So if it requires the owner to perform the work, that's a job or that's a well-paying freelance gig. If I'm the only person who can deliver the work. So your job as an owner is you start by doing everything. And then what you do is you fire yourself from a series of jobs that continue to elevate. So when you start a company, you do everything. You answer the phone, you plunge the toilet, you take the trash out, you end the sales calls. And then once you've built some revenue, you say, okay, how can I come to get help? And you say, well, I don't want to take the trash out and mop the floor at the warehouse anymore. So I'm going to hire somebody who comes in at night and does that. Awesome. Now you get to elevate yourself and you've made your first hire, which is a janitor. And then you say, I don't want to have to answer the phones. And what you do is building a company is a series of firing yourself from low leverage tasks so that you can focus on higher leverage tasks. And that could be all the way up to eventually firing yourself as the CEO of a company. And you could say, I'm actually firing myself from the CEO. I'm going to go be the chairman of the board, and I'm not involved in any part of the company anymore. So that's what building a business is firing yourself from a series of ever increasing responsibilities.
So the cost is more so justified for the time saved versus this thing that I will hire for is an income producing activity that can make me more money. It's more so how can I save myself the most amount of time? That's how you.
Generally speaking, in the beginning of companies in particular, the founder is the only one who can drive revenue. So you can't hire, I mean, growth is so important that if you're not a sales guy in a company, hiring somebody to solve that, you're going to be in trouble. And so generally speaking, it tends to be owners getting more into revenue driving activities and less into fulfillment activities over time, in my
Okay.
experience.
Okay. So you're saying from a sales standpoint, it's you first have to actually be able to sell yourself. And then you're saying then once you've done that, then you could hire the right people for that.
So in your instance, let's pretend you wanted to monetize this podcast. And okay, in the beginning, the first thing I'm going to fire myself for is editing the episodes because I can find somebody for $1,300 a month who can edit the episodes, make the shorts, write the show notes, whatever. Awesome. Then you're like, okay, I'm going to go sell some podcast ads. So you, Gabriel, are going to go do that because you're the best person to sell those ads. You can't hire somebody to do that right away. You don't even know if people will buy them. So you go out and you start doing that. Eventually, you've been doing that for some amount of time. You're like, I got this. I'm now going to hire a podcast salesperson, but I'm going to now go start working on the next thing to grow the company. I'm going to start a second show, or I'm going to start doing Instagram or whatever it is. And so until you know what the hell you're doing, generally speaking, I consider it very risky to go and hand that to somebody else because you don't know what a good job looks like. You don't know how long it should take. You don't know how many cold calls he needs to make a sale. But once you've done it, and that could be a very quick process, you can say, awesome, you should be making 50 cold calls to set up 20 calls to have 6 demos to close 1 sponsor for the podcast for about $2,000 an episode. Now you can hand that to a sales guy and he can go run with it. But until you've done that, you're guessing. And I don't like guessing in business.
In terms of your content, your letter, your business, where just feel free to plug yourself in. Where can people find you?
Sure. I'm at Matzner John on Twitter. I also have a podcast and a newsletter called Lazy Leverage, which you can Google and find. The other thing I will plug is if you follow Sagan Passport, either on Twitter or on LinkedIn, every business day, weekday at 9 a.m., we do a live talent drop. So you join and we're actually talking to people who are available for a free interview immediately. So if you want to get a sense of what this talent looks like live, every morning at 9 a.m., you just find us on the Sagan Passport on LinkedIn or on Twitter. And one of the members of my team will be interviewing somebody who's basically available for immediate hire. So if you want to kind of check that out, that's a great way as well.